here in Yosemite?
Not in Yosemite, but...
No, I saw one on the Wild and Scenic Road. He was sitting on a rock, enjoying a salmon for lunch.
That's great.
Yeah, very
Excellent.
impressive.
Yeah.
We saw one in Smoky Mountains.
Smoky Mountains.
Smoky Mountains,
Yeah.
great.
Saw it not
These are black
I've seen them
bears
at
too.
Rainier, and I've seen them in Yellowstone.
Great.
Yes.
Oh, that's
We can see
great.
some around Jenny Lake too, at the Teton.
Mm-hmm.
Quite a ways away.
Uh-huh.
See it going.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad you had a chance to see them. I hope you get a chance to see one here.
Can't
Most of
hurry.
them are probably starting to.
Hibernate?
Yeah,
Quite a
they-
ways, yes.
Yeah, after a day like that last night and
Yeah.
today, you can understand it.
Yeah, it makes sense, doesn't it? Well, we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome. I'm glad you came to join me this morning. My name is Carol Blaney, and I'm a ranger naturalist here at Yosemite. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to Yosemite National Park. It's one of the most beautiful places on earth, and I hope you're all enjoying your visit here. As I mentioned, I'm going to just do a brief 10-minute talk about Yosemite's bears. And I'm hoping that what I'll be able to do is tell you a little bit about how we're connected, how we're kin to bears, and also how in Yosemite especially we have the power of life and death over them. And maybe I'll leave you with an idea, I'm hoping, of how you can save the life of Yosemite's bears, because we all have the ability to do that with our own behavior. I'd like to start out by telling you a story. Hi, you're welcome to come join us if you like. I'd like to tell you a story. When I came to Yosemite, one of the things I found out was that the ranger naturalists do bear roving at night, and that means that we go around to the campgrounds, we talk to people in campsites and explain how to properly put away food and how to keep the campsite bear-proof. And one night when I was getting ready to go out and do this, we got a call on the radio saying that there's a crowd of people gathered around a couple of bears. Could we come and help? So the other ranger on duty and I went over to the Mirror Lake area. Have you ever been up to Mirror Lake? Yeah, very nice. So it's on a road, and sure enough, there was a crowd of about 25 people gathered around, and they had been watching apparently 2 bears eating a deer carcass, and we think that the deer had been killed by a mountain lion. But because this crowd had gathered, the bears had skedaddled up a tree. They just run up a tree. That's pretty typical. We were talking beforehand that the bears that we have in Yosemite are American black bears. And they're pretty reticent to hang out around people for the most part. And if given a chance, if they're frightened, they'll run, and running up a tree is a favorite way for them to escape. Grizzly bears are a different story. They're more aggressive, and as we talked about earlier, they were hunted out in the 1920s here. But these black bears had run up a tree. It was a sow, a female, and a yearling cub. So we moved the crowd back away from the deer carcass. Sure enough, the bears backed down the tree. It's great to see a bear back down a tree, that brown behind moving down, and they did and wandered off. And then an amazing thing happened. While we were all standing around and talking, this big, sleek, black bear, probably 300 or 350 pounds, strolled across the road, and following his nose, because bears have an amazing sense of smell, he wandered right up to that same deer carcass. He sat down on the ground and he began to feast. He stuck his long snout down into that carcass. He'd pull it down, pull it back up, and his face was all full of red slop, and he would lick it and chew and go down, dive for another bite. And we watched him do this for about 20 minutes or half an hour. And when he was done, he used those big claws that you see down there, used those claws to dig up some dirt and spread it on the carcass, and then he laid down flat on top of it. And it was really incredible. Disgusting, for sure, but incredible, because here we were in a place that's pretty populated. We're right next to a road. You know, we're in a place that gets millions of visitors every year, and here was this wild black bear doing wild bear things, and we got to see it. It was great. And so that was one of the highlights of my ranger life here, just being able to watch that. Thinking about that, what do we have in common with a flesh-eating creature like that? Any ideas? What do we have in common?
I had ribs last week.
which means that we eat flesh, we eat meat, or most of us do, but we also depend on plant material. And with this skull that we're passing around here, and I borrow it just for a minute, this is great evidence for that, because you look at the canines and the incisors, they're sharp for tearing meat, and these back molars are flat for grinding plant material. Well, you know, you look at our mouth, it's the same setup. We're omnivores, just like the bears are. That's right. Yep, they don't bite with their
Now, is
molars.
that true for all bears? I mean, are they all omnivores, like grizzlies and all, or do they eat more berries? And
Well, other bears, like grizzly bears, are also omnivorous. Some bears, like polar bears, are primarily carnivorous.
Yeah.
Right. But black bears, you know, probably 75% of their diet or more is made up of berries,
Yeah.
acorns, grass. And the meat that they eat, sometimes they'll happen on a deer carcass like that, but the meat they eat is often insect material. They depend on a huge variety, so they're omnivores. They're also, as you can see by looking at this pelt, and you're welcome to touch it either now or after the program, they're mammals, you know, just like we are. We're furry, you know, we're furry, we have a strong scent. And we also, both bears and humans, nurse and nurture our young. Bear mothers are iconic mothers. You know, you never want to get between a mother bear and her cub. She'll fiercely defend that cub. Beyond that, they also teach their cubs, you know, very carefully how to find food, how to keep safe, how to climb a tree, how to take care of themselves. They spent about 17 months going through that with their cubs. They discipline their cubs, you know, they'll give them a spank, mostly if they're doing something that's unsafe, you know, something that can result in their death. So they're mothers, you know, really strong parents just like we are. And they also have one other thing in common that I think is something we don't always think about, and that's their way of being in the world, their sort of personality, if you will. They're really intelligent, they're really stubborn, they learn quickly, and they're very curious. So I don't know, when you were kids, did you ever walk around from phone booth to phone booth and check the, you know, find out some coins and still do that? Yeah. Well, black bears in Yosemite Valley who are used to people have a similar habit. They will walk around the campgrounds and check bear box locks to see if people have latched them properly. And if they haven't, they'll pop open the bear box and eat what's inside. And that brings up one of the other things we have in common. We both love fast food. And humans like fast food out of convenience. You know, that's we can zip through a drive-through. Well, not in Yosemite exactly, but you know, in cities you can zip through a drive-through and pick up something really quickly to eat. Well, bears have a biological drive, not for fast food so much, but for getting lots of calories quickly, especially at the end of a season. They need to put on enough weight to help them make it through their winter sleep, which is not exactly a hibernation. It's a long sleep where they don't eat. So they need enough food to do that. If they're female, they also need enough weight, enough fat to sustain a pregnancy. A female bear will mate. She'll have that fertilized egg inside her, but it won't implant and develop into a full-fledged pregnancy unless she's put on enough weight. So they're biologically programmed to get food and get food quickly. So if you were a bear, think about it. You know, if you want to spend several hours a day looking for acorns and grass and berries, you want to do that? Or do you want to spend 15 minutes scarfing up Cliff Bars and leftover pizza and whatever else you could? Well, the bears, they're smart. That's what they do if they're given the opportunity. It makes biological sense for them. It unfortunately leads to some pretty awful consequences, and that is if they get food like that multiple times, not only do they begin to depend on it and begin to seek it out, but it also changes their behavior. They become what's called habituated. They become used to getting human food, and they become more aggressive. At least some of them do, because they begin to assume that they're the dominant animal. You know, if they walk up to a campsite and everybody flees, you know, of course they're going to assume that they're dominant. And that's that's what we're trying to prevent in the park, because it leads to some really difficult safety issues. And I'd like to tell you a story about one bear that this happened to, and her offspring. Up in Little Yosemite Valley, which is a backpackers campground on the way to Half Dome, very popular, stopping point and passing through. Thousands of people pass through there. And there was a bear up there, about an 8-year-old sow, a couple of 100 pounds, who discovered how to get human food and that she could get it pretty readily. She also found out how to crack open bear canisters that the backpackers use, the black plastic ones, and she began to really, seek out food aggressively. She was an example of what I call a CEO bear. Smart, aggressive, opportunistic, entrepreneurial, really, really a clever bear. She taught her offspring the same behaviors. And one of her cubs took it a step further and began to take backpacks off people's backs. And in one case actually put her paws on someone's waist and sniffed their face. Can you imagine having that? Would be really frightening. And the park took a look at that, and the Bear Council decided that those bears couldn't, we couldn't continue to have that happen. Relocation doesn't work, so they ended up putting the bears down. And that was this past summer. And that's a sad ending for the bears, certainly, who forfeited their lives, but also for the people who had to make that decision, and for the people who had to carry it out. Those are wildlife technicians who have chosen their life's work based on their love for animals, and to have to put down an animal was really painful.
Now, why doesn't relocation work to an area that would be much further away?
Bears can navigate back, and they do.
So, even if you took it like to the Humboldts in Nevada or someplace, really far away and much more like up by Elko or something where there's fewer people.
Well, you have to weigh that, because most places have some people around that don't want a problem bear relocated to that area. And if it's relocated in the same ecosystem, they really do make their ways back. And so that's...
So the babies completely learned to hunt for human food as opposed to natural.
Right. And some bears who habituate like that will do both. We've seen examples of that. But these bears just have become really, really aggressive. People were hand feeding them, or trying to hand feed them. So we bear some responsibility for the habituation. And so that's what we're trying to learn how to prevent in the park, by educating ourselves, educating other people about how to prevent it. And we're hoping that by that education, we can not have those kinds of incidents happen. Given that, what are some ideas about how we can save the lives of those bears? Any suggestions?
Keep your food safe.
Right, keep your food safe. Don't approach a wild animal of any kind, really. Certainly not a bear. And if a bear comes into a developed area, the rangers, we chase them off. We suggest that visitors make a lot of noise to keep them out. With a wild bear, you just give them distance. Let them be. They're doing what they're supposed to. But with an habituated bear, we say, make noise and scare them off. I'd like to just wrap up by saying that, we've talked a lot about how we're kin with bears, we're mammals and omnivores, and have these personalities in common. And the Miwok Indians who used to live in this area recognized that kinship. And even though they were hunters and gatherers and hunted deer and other animals for food, they didn't hunt the bears, because they considered that bears were their relatives. And so I'm hoping that that's one of the ideas that we can carry with us, and maybe keep that in mind, that as we're moving through the park and living here, that we treat the bears like our relatives with the same amount of respect. So thank you so much for coming. It was a real pleasure to talk with you today. And if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
When do they begin to hibernate?